thin face of the missioner who had promised on his faith in God to care for Nada, and who had passed the settler's cabin alone. Another 2 hours they went on, and then came the first of the green timber. Under the shelter of some balsams Jolly Roger found a resting place, and there they waited for the break of dawn. Peter stretched out and slept. But Jolly Roger sat with his head and shoulders against the bole of a tree, and not until the light of the moon was driven away by the darkness that preceded dawn by an hour or two did his eyes close in restless slumber. He was roused by the wakening twitter of birds, and in the cold water of a creek that ran near he bathed his face and hands. Peter wondered why there was no fire and no breakfast this morning. The settlement was only a little way ahead, and it was very early when they reached it. People were still in their beds, and out of only one chimney was smoke rising into the clear calm of the breaking day. From this cabin a young man came, and stood for a moment after he had closed the door, yawning and stretching his arms and looking up to see what sort of promise the sky held for the day. After that he went to a stable of logs, and Jolly Roger followed him there. He was unlike the bearded settler, and nodded with a youthful smile of cheer. "Good morning," he said. "You're traveling early, and—" He looked more keenly as his eyes took in Jolly Roger's boots and clothes, and the gray pallor in his face. "Just get in?" he asked kindly. "And from the burnt country?" "Yes, from the burnt country. I've been away a long time, and I'm trying to find out if my friends are among the living or the dead. Did you ever hear of Father John, the missioner at Cragg's Ridge?" The young man's face brightened. "I knew him," he said. "He helped me to bury my brother 3 years ago. And if it's him you seek, he is safe. He went up to Fort William a week after the fire, and that was in September, 8 months past." "And was there with him a girl named Nada Hawkins?" asked Jolly Roger, trying hard to speak calmly as he looked into the other's face. The youth shook his head. "No, he was alone. He slept in my cabin overnight, and he said nothing of a girl named Nada Hawkins." "Did he speak of others?" "He was very tired, and I think he was half dead with grief at what had happened. He spoke no names that I remember." Then he saw the gray look in Jolly Roger's face grow deeper, and saw the despair which could not hide itself in his eyes. "But there were a number of girls who passed here, alone or with their friends," he said hopefully. "What sort of looking girl was Nada Hawkins?" "A kid. That's what I called her," said Jolly Roger, in a dead, cold voice. 18 and beautiful, with blue eyes, and brown hair that she couldn't keep from blowing in curls about her face. So like an angel you wouldn't forget her if you'd seen her, just once." Gently the youth placed a hand on Jolly Roger's arm. "She didn't come this way," he said, "but maybe you'll find her somewhere else. Won't you have breakfast with me? I've a stranger in the cabin, still sleeping, who's going into the fire country from which you've come. He's hunting for someone, and maybe you can give him information. He's going to Cragg's Ridge." "Cragg's Ridge!" exclaimed Jolly Roger. "What is his name?" "Breault," said the youth. "Sergeant Breault, of the Royal Northwest Mounted Police." Jolly Roger turned to stroke the neck of a horse waiting for its morning feed. But he felt nothing of the touch of flesh under his hand. Cold as iron went his heart, and for half a minute he made no answer. Then he said: "Thanks, friend. I breakfasted before it was light, and I'm hitting out into the brush west and north, for the Rainy River country. Please don't tell this man Breault that you saw me, for he'll think badly of me for not wanting to give him information he might want. But you understand, if you loved the brother who died, that it's hard for me to talk with anyone just now." The young man's fingers touched his arm again. "I understand," he said, "and I hope to God you'll find her." Silently they shook hands, and Jolly Roger hurried away from the cabin with the rising spiral of smoke. 3 days later a man and a dog came from the burned country into the town of Fort William, seeking for a wandering messenger of God who called himself Father John, and a young and beautiful girl whose name was Nada Hawkins. He stopped first at the old mission, in whose shadow the Indians and traders of a century before had bartered their wares, and Father Augustine, the aged patriarch who talked with him, murmured as he went that he was a strange man, and a sick one, with a little madness lurking in his eyes. And it was, in fact, a madness of despair eating out the life in Jolly Roger's heart. For he no longer had hope Nada had escaped the fire, even though at no place had he found a conclusive evidence of her death. But that signified little, for there were many of the missing who had not been found between the last of September and these days of May. What he did find, with deadly regularity, was the fact that Father John had escaped, and that he had traveled to safety alone. And Father Augustine told him that when Father John stopped to rest for a few days at the mission, he was heading north, for somewhere on Pashkokogon Lake near the river Albany. There was little rest for Peter and his master at Fort William town. That Breault must be close on their trail, and following it with the merciless determination of the ferret from which he had been named, there was no shadow of doubt in the mind of Jolly Roger McKay. So after outfitting his pack at a little corner shop, where Breault would be slow to inquire about him, he struck north through the bush toward Dog Lake and the river of the same name. 5 or 6 days, he thought, would bring him to Father John and the truth which he dreaded more and more to hear. The despondency of his master had sunk, in some mysterious way, into the soul of Peter. Without the understanding of language, he sensed the oppressive gloom of tragedy behind and about him, and there was a wolfish slinking in the manner of his travel now, and his confidence was going as he caught the disease of despair of the man who traveled with him. But constantly and vigilantly his eyes and scent were questing about them, suspicious of the very winds that whispered in the tree-tops. And at night, after they had built their little cooking fire in the deepest heart of the bush, he would lie half awake during the hours of darkness, the watchfulness of his senses never completely dulled in the stupor of sleep. Since the night they had stopped at the settler's cabin, Jolly Roger's face had grown grayer and thinner. A number of times he had tried to assure himself what he would do in that moment which was coming, when he would stand face to face with Breault the man-hunter. His caution, after he left Fort William, was in a way an automatic instinct that worked for self-preservation in face of the fact that he was growing less and less concerned regarding Breault's appearance. It was not in his desire to delay the end much longer. The chase had been a long one, with its thrills and its happiness at times, but now he was growing tired, and with Nada gone there was only hopeless gloom ahead. If she were dead, he wanted to go to her. That thought was a dawning pleasure in his breast, and it was warm in his heart when he tied in a hard knot the buckskin string which locked the flap of his pistol holster. When Breault overtook him, the law would know, because of the significance of this knot, that he had welcomed the end of the game. Never in the Northland had there come a spring more beautiful than this of the year in which McKay and his dog went through the deep wilds to Pashkokogon Lake. In a few hours, it seemed, the last chill died out of the air, and there came the soft whispers of those bridal weeks between May and summer, a month ahead of their time. But Jolly Roger, for the first time in his life, failed to respond to the wonder and beauty of the earth's rejoicing. The first flowers did not fill him with the old joy. He no longer stood up straight, with expanding chest, to drink in the rare sweetness of air weighted with the tonic of balsams and cedar spruce. Vainly he tried to lift